This broadcast is on the second half of the second class, so we talked about expressions, and obviously the lesson numbers don't correspond to the YouTube lesson numbers. But we're going to go over arithmetic operators, relational operators, logical operators, bitwise operators, and a lot of things are advanced. And in this screencast, I'm just going to skip over them pretty quickly. We'll come back to them later on in the course when they become more relevant and you have a little bit more knowledge about C++. So let's get started. So the first one you need is the assignment operator. It's just the equals symbol. So if you want to assign what the contents of y to the contents of x, x equals y. It's also legal in C++ to string multiples of these on a single line, but don't do it, just like we don't want to declare them all on a single line. So while you could do this and put, save one line of vertical space, put int x, y, and z, they're all ints, and then put x equals y equals z equals 0, prefer to do it this way, all in a single line. And, one argument used to be, well, you could change them all from 0 to some other value by doing that. Well, I'll show you a quick trick in Eclipse. There's this little icon up here, toggle to block selection mode. You can click that, and it changes, and your cursor becomes this crosshair, and now you can just you can select, and now everything you type changes on every line. So that argument no longer applies, and then you toggle that off again to get back out of block selection mode. So then we have the arithmetic operators. So all your standard math operators, subtraction, addition, multiplication, division, something called modulus, which you may not be familiar with, sometimes called remainder. If you took a number and just a decimal number and you divided it by 10, if you then do the modulus of number divided by 10, what you end up with is the amount less than 10. So if you do 18 modulus 10, you end up with 8. If you do 14 modulus 10, you end up with the 4. And this can often be very useful. And then C++ has two unique operators, the decrement, which is a minus minus, and the increment, which is a plus plus. And let me show you how this all works. So x equals x plus 1 is one way of adding 1 to the value of x. The pre-increment, you can put plus plus x. This will now, if x was 1 after this, x will have 2. You can also do it the post increment, and it pretty much does the same thing. We'll get to the difference. So now x would have 3. So let's look at the example. So x equals 10, y equals plus plus x. So y equals 11 and x equals 11. So let's start over again. If x equals 10 and we say z equals x plus plus, now we're doing it post. So what's going to happen is x is going to get assigned to z first, then x is going to get incremented. Here, x got incremented first, then it got assigned to y. So now z will equal 10 and x will equal 11. They'll have different values when this statement is done. Okay, so that's sort of the difference between pre-incrementing and post-incrementing. And the same thing happens with the decrement operator. If you do it beforehand, then the operation is decremented first, then assigned. And it's actually a little bit more efficient to use pre-increment than post-decrement and decrement operators. Okay, so just a brief editorial on terseness. C and C++ have a long history of putting lots of stuff and lots of operations on one line. It can be very hard to understand. I just want you to be aware that you're going to see some of it because they've become idiomatic, especially some things with pointers, and this is a fairly common one. And this is a clever bit of code that assigns what's pointed at by x to y until what's pointed at by x becomes 0. And it's I don't want to get into all the details of this, but you're going to see some stuff like this when you look at other people's code or legacy code. So just be aware of it, but we're typically not going to write any code like this in class. Okay, the relational operators: greater than and equals, less than and equals. And they have to be in this order, by the way. You cannot put the equals before the greater than symbol, so just the order shown. Equals equals, because if you remember, one equal is assignment, two equals is testing for equality. So this is how you say if x equals y, you use this equals equals operator. And then not equals, you put the little bang operator in front of the equals, and that means not equal to, so x not equal to y. Then we have logical operators. These are, you're probably less familiar with this, but when you want to combine some expressions and you want to AND them together, you use two AND symbols. If you want to OR them together, you use two vertical pipe symbols. And if you want to do the negation or the not, you use the bang symbol. So here's the example. If x equals y and a equals b, then we're going to do something. So both these conditions have to be true for us to do what's going to be inside the if statement. So if x equals y, and that should be a lowercase y, oops, sorry, or a equals b, then either condition will allow us to get in. And you should remember that, or you should know that C++ does something called short circuiting. So if this x equals y is true, well, it doesn't have to even evaluate the a equals b. It'll just go right on into your if statement at that point. And so sometimes if you write, like if you were calling a function that was returning true or false and ORing it with another function you were calling, you couldn't rely on this function getting called on the right side. It would get short-circuited. And then, of course, in an if statement, and that should be lowercase as well, if x equals y or a equals b, and this syntax for historical reasons is legal. See how it's not the equals equals, it's an assignment operator. So what C++ does is it assigns b to a, and if b is 0, this is false. If b is any other value, this evaluates to true. So it's just a little confusing. You don't ever want to do this. It typically, when you see this in code, it's a mistake. Sometimes people will do, like I showed in that previous idiom, they'll do things for idiomatic reasons, but we're going to avoid doing that kind of thing. Okay, so in the next video, we'll talk about bitwise operators and some of the other additional operators in C++.